Okay, so the YouTube settings are all good to go. So we are live on YouTube now. And I will go ahead and I'm gonna wait until you're ready to start the recording, just so that we don't have the extra couple minutes on the recording.
And I see Seth and Michael. Do you guys want to unmute once and say hello, and let's make sure that your microphones work?
Hey, this is Seth. Does that work?
You're good.
It's Mike.
Michael, you're getting some feedback.
Okay. Any suggestions?
Are you two in the same room or?
No.
Okay, just double checking.
Mike,
maybe turn your mic or your speakers down just a tiny bit.
Okay.
You go ahead and speak again. Oh no, I can hear me.
I guess I could.
Do you have headphones with a microphone attached, or?
Yeah, I'll give that a shot.
Okay.
And it is 5:30. My name is Jim Brewer. I'm the hearings officer for the city of Salem. I see that this meeting is now being recorded. Thank you, Zachary. Tonight, we only have one thing on the agenda, which is a hearing for VAR SI 20-03. The hearing procedure tonight, due to the pandemic, in order to comply with social distancing measures in place to help prevent the spread of the COVID-19 virus, this hearing is only going to be held digitally, and people who wish to testify orally must have already signed in with the recording secretary prior to 3 p.m. today, and I think we have a couple of people online for that purpose. Otherwise, of course, people could have submitted comments in writing, although I don't believe that has happened. The order of tonight's proceedings will be a staff report first, to be presented by Olivia Diaz. The applicant's presentation, there's a time limit on the applicant's presentation. It's 15 minutes. Not required to fill all the time, but that is the amount of time that we'll have. A neighborhood report, if any, and it seems like we don't have one, which would be limited to 10 minutes. And then if we have anyone who has signed in for testimony, we begin with testimony in favor of the application, limited to 5 minutes. Testimony in opposition, limited to 5 minutes. Testimony that's neutral, limited to 5 minutes. Then we can have rebuttal by the applicant. That would be limited in scope to issues raised in opposition, and we'd limit that to 5 minutes as well. At that point, we'd close the public hearing. Anyone who wishes to can make a request to hold the record open or a continuance. And if you're going to do that in your testimony this evening so that I can make a decision whether a continuance is necessary. If you make a request to have the record held open, we'll do that. This is sign variance, sign permit case number VAR SI 20-03 for 827 Lancaster Drive Northeast. The hearing's now open. I want to direct your attention to the applicable criteria found in the notice. The testimony and evidence for this public hearing must be directed towards these criteria. Sign variances are found in section 900.040. Sub D is the criteria. An application for a sign variance shall be granted if the following criteria are met. 1, compliance with the applicable standard would create an unnecessary hardship due to unique or unusual physical conditions of the property over which the applicant has no control, such as topography and lot shape, which are not present on other properties in the vicinity that have the same zone designation. The hardship does not result from actions of the applicant, owner, or previous owners of the property, and the sign variance is limited to the minimum reasonably necessary to alleviate the problem caused by the unique or unusual physical conditions. 2, the sign variance is necessary to permit signage comparable with other properties in the vicinity that have the same zone designation. 3, the sign variance will not adversely affect the function or appearance of the development and use of the property and surrounding properties. And 4, the sign variance will not impose limitations on other properties and signage in the area, including signage that would be allowed on adjacent properties. And then there is separate criteria for the sign permits. An application for sign permit shall be granted if the following criteria are met. The sign meets the requirements of SRC Chapter 56. The sign is allowed in the zone. The sign will not interfere with the use of any public right-of-way, other public easements, or other publicly owned property. And the sign conforms to all the applicable standards in the chapter. It's a time when I need to remind people who testified tonight that failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the city or other parties the opportunities to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the State Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. These matters must be raised in your testimony, or you may not be able to raise them later. If there are any objections on jurisdictional grounds on the holding of this hearing, meaning that this is not the kind of thing that ought to be in front of the hearings officer, please provide that objection in your testimony. This is sign variance, sign permit case number VAR-SI 20-03 for 827 Lancaster Drive Northeast. May we have the staff report, Ms. Diaz? And I think you're muted still. I think you're muted.
All the toolbars move around every time we do this. Sorry. Good evening. My name is Olivia Diaz. I'm current planning manager for the division. We're here for sign variance VAR-SI 2003 for the Willamette Town Center located at 827 through 955 Lancaster Drive. I'd like to enter the staff report, this presentation, into the record.
And it will be. Thank you.
So the applicant has requested to increase the display surface of an existing freestanding sign to 548 square feet. The sign is originally permitted under 900.200 CAIA as a freestanding sign for the shopping center. So the sign is existing and located along I-5 north of Center Street. And then you have a rendering of what the sign was going to look like with the additional panel, which is the lower panel, the lower 6 tenant space panels. The application was filed in August. We deemed the application complete. Notice was mailed and notice was posted on site. We have a little bit of time before a 120-day mandate. So the subject property is located on the corner of Center Lancaster, also on the corner of D and Lancaster, and abuts I-5 to the west. The city limits is just south of the property. And so the subject property is zoned, or the subject development site is zoned CR, so commercial, retail, or retail commercial. To the north, you have some residential areas, some CO, CR, a mix of multifamily and single family. South is outside of the city limits, and then across Lancaster, there's mostly commercial properties. So here you have an aerial photo of the subject property. The site, it does contain the Willamette Town Center. It has been going through several remodeling and new buildings going up. The tenants have increased out here, and we have had multiple sign variances out here before. So it's a pretty large site. And so this is the current site plan. So with the sign, and then there's some new buildings shown on site. Again, a rendering of what the proposed sign is going to be. So we have a picture from I-5, Interstate 5. So the top half of this, the display surface board, and then the 4 tenant spaces are existing, and then the bottom half of this will be new. So looking at the decision criteria, the subject property is a 48-acre site. It is a shopping center. It has really long frontages along Lancaster and D. The property is limited in the amount of freestanding signs that they're allowed based off of the frontages of the property. I-5 is not a street frontage. When we updated the UDC multiple years ago, I-5 is no longer considered a street frontage. So this sign is technically located on a street frontage, located on I-5 with a variance prior to that code change. It is counted towards their maximum allowance of signs on the site. But due to the long street frontage, the unique size of this property compared to other properties, and the amount of tenants on the space, staff believes, and it's found in your staff report, it believes that the decision criteria is met based on the existing physical conditions of the property. We did compare to other properties in the area, and based on the size and the relationship to size and signs, it would be comparable to other properties within that zone. As in your staff report, there's no adverse effect. The sign is going to function similar to how it functions currently, and it won't impose any limits on any other signs in the area. We did review the sign permit. The sign will meet all of the standards if the variance is approved. The sign is currently taller than what's allowed in code, but there was a previous variance that approved the height for that sign. So we did not receive any public testimony from public agencies, any testimony. The staff report did not say that we didn't have any comments from neighborhood associations, but we did have a comment of no objection from NESCA, and then ELNA did not comment on the application. So with that, staff recommends approval of the application. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
So the question, I remember the prior variance, which is I recall was to increase the height of the sign so that it would be more visible from I-5.
Right.
The additional panels being below the sign or below the, are they going to be visible from I-5?
So just from driving by Mr. Brewer, the ODOT has cut some of the trees that were blocking the visibility in that area. So yes, it would be visible from the interstate.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Would the applicant like to make a presentation?
Yes, I'll speak briefly. I think Olivia covered, pretty much everything. I'm Seth Garay with C. John Lancaster Development Company. As you've probably seen out there, we've been in the midst of a redevelopment over the last 5 or 6 years as the retail industry has been rapidly changing and going away from interior malls with large anchors. We've seen a number of anchors go into bankruptcy and cease to exist, like Sports Authority and Sears, and the closing of Macy's. So as part of that, we've been what we call kind of inside out in the mall and going to smaller tenant spaces with kind of a different focus than your traditional department stores. As part of what we've done over the last 5 years, the addition of Hobby Lobby and Home Goods, Sierra Trading Post, we had kind of gotten to a spot where the mall, the major buildings were pretty full. The sign, that sign specifically, Sears and Regal actually had claim to the fourth place, so it's completely full. And then Sears eventually goes bankrupt and ceases, and now we have another 100,000 square feet wide open with there's not a lot of 90,000 to 100,000 square foot tenants out there in the market anymore. So we're now in the midst of carving up the Sears box to have TJ Maxx, and then that's the only signed tenant at this point. They're taking about a quarter of it. So we'll eventually have probably 3 to 6 additional tenants within that space, and then COVID was another hit where we took a mostly full interior mall that was I'd say limping along. And that's, we've had probably 40 to 50% of those tenants close over the past 5 months, or, going to close in the near future. So we're now looking at it as, obviously Sears is the immediate thing, but then what are we now? We're, kind of our 5 to 10 year plan is now what do we do now as things accelerate? And we think, as Olivia mentioned, the size and shape and topography of the shopping center is really unique in Salem. And signage is obviously a big piece to attract the type of retail tenants or potentially other types of tenants to fill this kind of square footage. We see, in the kind of the region, really Kaiser Station is our major competitor for tenants. And, as anybody that's driven on I-5 before has seen, Kaiser Station has, one of the biggest signs I've ever seen. It's probably visible from space. I don't know, but we think that, really this is the, what can kind of help us out to get, enough signage that we can continue the redevelopment. And it's not anywhere near what they have. So we think it is kind of the smallest that'll kind of get the job done and still be reasonable and not, something that, looks crazy or anything. So yeah, I mean, we're happy to answer any questions. And Jim, you did bring up the original variance for height. And that was completely because originally, ODOT had all of that vegetation in front. And I don't think anyone at C. John, that was right before my time, believed we would ever get, any approvals or get ODOT to clear anything out. But that was something where, I don't know, they must have had a moment of weakness, and I think they were tired of people living in the bushes. So that is cleared out now, and that's kind of given us the opportunity to do this additional signage and have it be visible. So that's the history on that. So I have, our planners here, and I have Dylan with our sign company. So if there's any questions, we should be able to answer them. So yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you. I think that I did the hearing on the prior variance on the sign, and yeah, that was my recollection, is that the trees were there and no one expected them to get any shorter. And there was even some question about, well, would this height be enough? And the similar comments about the competitor just a few miles north with a really big sign. I don't really have any particular questions about the sign. I think the application pretty well speaks for itself. I tend to think the staff report has done a good job of covering the criteria. Anything else you want to add?
No, I think we're good. Thank you.
If somebody else from your team wants to talk, we've got a little time left, but
I I think we're
I
good.
don't see anybody volunteering.
Yeah.
Okay. So with that, I'll quickly go through and see if we do have anybody who has accidentally signed on. It sounds like, Zachary, that has not happened. Is that right?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So I will say, if there's anyone who wishes to speak in favor of the application from the public, this would be the time to do that. I don't see anybody coming on to do that. If anyone would like to speak in opposition, this would be the time to do that. I don't see anybody coming on right now. Unfortunately, that means you get no chance for rebuttal. I don't see anybody coming on to speak neutrally. So with that, I'm going to close the public hearing. I will say, for the reasons that we've already discussed, the staff report's done a good job of covering everything. The application pretty well speaks for itself. You've met your burden of proof. We're going to approve this. It will likely take me a week to get it out. So thank you. And with that, this hearing is closed. And that's the only thing we have on our agenda.
Yay.